Jim Freeman.
It's getting hot in here? Go ahead, Jim.
One of the things that I've always been intrigued about, Jay, is that when you send off for something, somebody sends in a mailer and you send off for it, you know, like you say, Jim, you're real hot to
Mac,
get it.
I'm Mac.
Mac, I'm sorry. You want it real bad, and so you call up and you give them your credit card call, and I'm always amazed, and I know you don't try to do this, but at 6 weeks, you know, you say, well, when can I get it? It's 6 weeks, it's 8 weeks, it's 9 weeks. Could you respond to that? Why is that? Why wouldn't somebody want to turn that around?
Internal politics.
Yeah.
Internal.
It costs a lot to do it. Some people have such big. It's almost like turning around a ocean liner or a freighter or an oil. Do you ever try to turn a stop? What does it take to stop a an oil, a barge, an oil, whatever, super tanker? It's like 5 miles or something.
But don't they make more money in the float?
I don't think that's why they do it.
It.
You know what it is? It's just the internal. It's normally you got to understand three things. One, 90% of the 800 numbers you're calling are not on site. They're services. They're huge services. They get the order. They transship it to the company. The company has to input it. It goes in the system. I mean, there is no reason. There's a lot of people who are really good and they'll acknowledge right away.
The good companies.
The good companies, the ones who understand it. But a lot of companies.
Often the marketing person's out there on a wing and a prayer. So
Yeah.
that's sort of, I used to call
It
it.
hasn't been written yet.
Product might not be ready.
Well, the product, but more than likely the product's ready. But some accountant has said we can't afford to spend any money on this.
The extra. They don't.
We don't want an extra person to handle
And
this.
they won't
this
even
has
test
to
the
go into our
relative
normal
difference.
flow of business.
Even big companies won't test the relative difference that accelerating fulfillment, or at least, by the way, in the worst case, the most important thing to do is at least acknowledge. If you get a letter saying, I'm so happy, and most people don't even do this, I'm so happy you bought it, the system we use is a little bit slow, but don't worry, it'll probably be this, you'll get it, where you're going to have so much joy, or so much benefit, or save so much money, or whatever. At least acknowledging is a reassuring device.
Incidentally, just as an aside, if you haven't said anything to the contrary, if you don't and you can't deliver in 30 days, you better advise.
That's illegal.
That's illegal. That's the 30-day rule. You must advise clients that have ordered something that they are not going to get fulfillment
Unless you stipulate in the ad.
Stipulate in your offer. That's why it often says 4 to 6 weeks. People are buying themselves a little time. Yeah. What that does to their offer, I don't know.
Also, you got to realize if it's shipped, most people ship bulk rate,
right.
UPS. If it's a magazine, you got to understand something.
It takes that long time.
I mean, you got to get into the system, and it's a cycle. I mean, it's more acceptable for a magazine because if you come in today, they may have just put out
only a cheap magazine. Subscriptions.
What?
You really have to more and more. That is an unacceptable practice. If you find people doing that, and your clients say that is unacceptable, that is killing your business.
But it is axiomatic. The quicker you respond, presuming the product is worth a damn, or the service is worth a damn, the more satisfaction, the more residual value you will be accruing for that client and for yourself.
If you start getting a treasurer who starts worrying about the float rather than the customer receiving the product, you have a company that sooner or later is going to go down the tube.
That's right, because they're not going to have the back end. The back end is where it's at normally. Let me continue. I learned how to use very inventive letters to get people's attention. And I learned how to, I did lots of, this is funny, I did tons of mailgrams back, because mailgrams used to be cheap. Now they're very expensive, I think. And I learned it, I don't know if it's still true.
They're phony mailgrams, some of these.
But I did them before they had the phony ones. And I spent hours one time doing this. There used to be 67 characters on the printed piece on a Western Union mailgram. And if you take 33 as sort of your halfway mark, you can do some really neat geometric things with headlines and pyramid type things. And when I dictated mailgrams, they were powerful mailgrams. They would have headlines, they would have, because I would spend 4 hours dictating, and I'd tell the operator, okay, drop down 3 lines, and go 14 lines from the right. And I didn't care about their screen, I just cared about the printout, and they would think I was crazy. One time they changed shifts, and I was still dictating. And if you ever use a mailgram, you should know the following. When you give a name and address, city and state, and then you start, the stupid operators don't drop down. So you got to tell them, drop down 2 lines. Put space between things, because the impact is about 10 times more potent than when you just have it all clustered together in one. I mean, it's like people, it's funny, I don't know if you guys look at the way we write letters, but most people write business letters where they don't even put any spacing between paragraphs. Their paragraphs are this long and they're not broken up. And you got to fight to want to read them, don't you?
In fact, people will say you can't have a one-sentence paragraph. You can when you're writing copy.
You have a one-word paragraph. There are no rules. There are no rules. And the more you write like people talk, the more people will embrace them naturally. The objective of an ad or the objective of a letter is not to blatantly say I'm an ad or a letter. It's to be so natural and so informative and so appealing that the person is immersed in it, and it's like a dialogue between you and they forget that this is a letter. They forget this is a sales piece. That just basically they're into the offer and the proposition and the information you're disseminating. And you've got a harmonic. So you're in simpatico. You got basically a dialogue going with them. I learned how little people are used to performing relative to when going on contingency. How few people will take a contingency proposition, and how most people don't really anywhere close. 90% of the business have no conception of what the possibilities are. They just run an ad and they think that's all they're capable of doing. They don't test. They don't follow up. They'll send one follow up and never send anything else. And it just was an interesting learning. It was very revealing to me. I got this incredible microcosm that was taught to me.
You're sitting there nodding, but I can tell you it'll come up between proteges that people are offering contingency deals, and well,
this is hilarious.
The proteges won't give up any part of.
Well, this is funny. We've had about 7 incidences like this where one protege put together a plan. We have lots of different people who will do different things, and they're really interesting nuances. We'll go over those in the last day with you, some of the other ones from the past that are available. And Karen, if I don't cover them all, you can remind me. And some of the proteges say, well, I'm not going to pay 25% of what I make for using that. And I say, you hypocrite, how in the world, if you can't be true to it, how can you expect anyone else to pay you? But there's a human
That's too much.
nature.
I want to pay $25.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's really weird. It's bizarre, but you have to deal with that. If you can't deal with it, how can you expect your client to? It's very interesting.
But it's a good experience because you have to go through your internal dialogue to get by.
I learned something else from Jim. The guy I worked for was really sort of he was a rapscallion is a good name. And he had this really interesting, he was one of these, he reminds me of the people who wrote those comments that no offense to you, but that I chronicled on the earlier about, let's get on with it. He had this habit of looking at all these offers in the newspaper and magazines and wanting to knock them off. But he wouldn't take the time to try to figure out what they were doing. And it was hilarious because a lot of people you can't figure out, just because they're running a lot of ads doesn't mean that those ads are making upfront money. They may be a useful host for something else. And unless you take a lot of time to study, and the only way you'll study is by responding and seeing what happens, and it requires a long period of time, maybe 3 or 5 or 6 processions before you really figure out what somebody's all about, if they're astute or stupid, either one. And this guy would just always try to knock off everything without trying to figure out what they were doing, and nothing would ever work. And I used to watch him, and it was like he had this need to do things. He just had to move. He had to find out about setups. It was an interesting lesson. He blew so much money and so much energy. I used to watch him. Every time I was going to do a knockoff, I had this little laugh, and I'd say to the staff, I'd say, it's going to screw up because he has no idea what these people are doing. He just wants to do what they're doing superficially without understanding what their motive is.
If you become a leader in a business, it's incredible. People start trying to knock you off. I mean, it's really fascinating, and often they're knocking off things that don't work.
It's like, but on the corollary, it's like now that you understand marginal net worth theory, you can appreciate the merit in buying lots of customers and not making any money on them, presuming you have the cash flow for the back end, and presuming you've got a system in place to cultivate the back end. Your competitors wouldn't understand that, and if they tried to knock you off, they wouldn't understand, and presuming they don't have a back end, it could be suicidal for them. This gentleman in the back who owns all the mail order companies, is he still here? Is that you? I mean, give him the mic. I mean, so many mail order companies will lose money. I mean, if you just see people running catalogs, everyone thinks you make money on catalog mailing. You don't necessarily up front, do you?
No, not at all.
But that's the investment for the second or third. You got to build your customer base. Got anything you want to add?
It's business.
Not really.
Well, do anyway.
We need to fill time.
It's a relatively
Just
simple
say, this is great. This is fabulous information. It's changed my whole life. I can.
Well,
we-
what is,
No, we've been using the back end. We do have some mailing pieces that aren't working for us, and that's,
But the point is, if you were
I'm here
trying-
for fine tuning.
But there are people who, I mean, you can't, just because you see people doing something without knowing the relative, all the relevant parts of it, it can be suicidal to try to knock somebody off, couldn't
How
it?
many of these companies you took over were sending out lots of mail, and if you didn't know any better, you'd think they were successful doing what they were doing.
Oh, that's true. Very true.
Tons of people.
And I've knocked off a few ads and haven't worked either.
Because you hadn't figured out what the whole, what was,
Really don't know what's going on.
and a lot of people just, they're so, I think the thing I'm trying to implore you is don't be in a hurry. Admittedly, 1 second please. Admittedly, you're trying to rush to either get cash flow positive, to pay for your tuition, or you're trying to throw off the shackles of encroachment that your current job or profession finds you in. But believe me, if you move forward but you're not in too big a hurry, you'll prosper a hell of a lot more than you will trying to do it all instantly and not really knowing what you're doing. Now, yes, sir.
Jay, excuse me, what does it mean to knock something off?
To try to plagiarize or emulate something and do your own version of it, but when I say without knowing what the whole master plan is, what the profound objective of that person is.
It comes from the garment business, where people knock off designer clothes, and they do cheaper versions of them. They steal the design and they modify it enough so that it can't be actionable, but they try to put that on the market. And it's like walking down a street in a major city and seeing Vuitton bags or Gucci luggage.
Oh,
that
it
isn't
was
Gucci
funny.
luggage. Those are
In
knockoffs.
Bangkok, I was in Bangkok, and you can buy Rolexes for $5, and you can buy, all these designer goods for fractions. It's true. That's right. I learned also in this taught me more probably than anything how to sit, figuratively speaking, on the same side of the desk as the person I was attempting to help. How when I was trying to sell them, I couldn't do it, but when I subordinated that and started trying to help him understand more of the possibilities, gave him free information and education that I knew wouldn't bear one way or the other in my business, but would help him immensely, that if I helped him make more money, it was implicit. And even today, as calloused and jaded as most people seem to think humanity is, there is a fundamental inclination to reciprocate. Don't you think, Daniel? Yes. He said yes. And
That was what he was supposed to say.
yeah, that's right. But I think you guys don't realize if you give freely, by and large, you'll get back so much. That's the essence of what you got to embrace. It really works. And so many people are so covetous, and it's me, me, me instead of you, you, you. If you can learn to worry about your service benefiting the other person and sitting on their side of the desk and subordinating your need, it's like, you don't care what my motivation is here, do you really? I mean, all you care about, think about it, you don't care at all about why I'm here. Pardon?
It did occur somewhere along the line.
All you care about is what's in this for you. Life is no different. I got to address your problem. I got to figure out what you need and what you want and what's necessary for you to flourish. And the more I worry about you, the more successful you will be, and the more successful you will be, the more successful I will be. But if all I worry, 1 second, about is making money and getting the hell out of here quickly and doing this thing 8 hours a day for 2.5 days, neither of us will succeed. Yes? Need a mic.
Do I have it? Okay. Is there one event in your life, Jay, that you can say crystallized that belief, that attitude towards getting on the side of the table with the client and
I think this probably more than anything. Well, no, probably when I did Icy Hot, I tried to identify why people didn't do deals, and I realized that everyone was making them take all the risk. And when I realized that if the deal was good, if I took away, eliminated all that risk, and I bore it on myself, it would seem like it would make the proposition many times more exciting.
Was that a conscious decision, or was that
I don't
a
think any of this was
reaction?
conscious. I'm just saying what happened, and I'm not finished yet, but about 10 years ago, I sort of sat down in rumination or reflection And all these things sort of made sense to me, and then I got supercharged, and a lot of things made sense. I spent when I was, and I haven't gotten there yet, but I'll advance a few transactions here. I worked for Entrepreneur Magazine, and one of the things I did when I worked for them was I engaged an advertising expert named Dan Rosenthal, who publishes Silver and Gold Report. But people don't know he started off being an advertising expert, and he ended up just owning his own businesses. I brought him down to spend 2.5 days with us, and we did a trade. We traded him $20,000 worth of advertising for his time, and he treated that just like I paid him. I respected that. He treated it just like he prepared for it. He had a tutorial. He gave me the most incredible education in marginal net worth theory I've ever seen, and he gave me one of the most incredible bibliographies and old out-of-print books I'd ever had, and I spent a year and $2,000 finding those books and reading them. And that probably brought it all home, but I don't think it would have been brought home if I hadn't had all those other experiences to sort of converge together. I don't know if that helps you or not.
Well, I'm trying to find out if there's like a point in time or a culmination of experiences that one can interpret as being painful, and it was the pain of that caused you to seek a different way to secure a customer or client relationship.
I don't know. Ask me that question in a couple days, because I don't know. I've never thought about it. I mean, I don't consciously think about it. I'm just telling you this sort of a metamorphosis occurred. After Unimail, I went to work for a very limited time for a company called Free Enterprise. Anybody remember? There was 2 versions of it. The Free Enterprise that I was affiliated was in the 70s. It was an incredible magazine. Anybody remember it?
Is that Peck
The Peck Roads. It was a fascinating magazine, Business Opportunity magazine. It was incredible. This guy started it from scratch and built it to 700,000 or 800,000 subscribers, and it had incredible articles. And I met him trying to do deals with Unimail, and he and I hit it off, and I started consulting with him, and I realized he wasn't working his back end at all. What I learned was the following. The difference between being a great promotion and being a business. This guy had an incredible promotion where he sold 700,000 people in about 6 months a $14 subscription. Unfortunately, he decided he wanted to be Time Life, and he literally took the top floor of the Shell building across from Time Life on Avenue of the Americas, and he spent $30,000 a month, and he brought on this whole staff, and he ate away all his capital in about 9 months, and it turned into a disaster. Trying to be what you're not is financially lethal. I think a lot of people don't reconcile themselves to who and what they are. And a lot of people I have met over the years, and Mac knows this, I've chronicled it, a lot of people are nothing more, in my opinion, than one elongated promotion trying to act like they're businesses. They don't realize how tentative. I have a lot of friends in the gold business who still believe that gold is the answer. I'm not knocking gold, but trying to only sell gold and be a gold dealer today, I think, and I know 3 or 4 people that have been doing it for 3 or 4 or 5, or excuse me, for like 15 years, it's really sort of stupid to not be diversified. They're just waiting for the great times to come back. I learned how to save face generating cash flow. This fellow got into terrible trouble. And he had a philosophy. He didn't want to sell mail order ads, and that was the only thing that was good for his ad. He wanted to sell cigarette ads, and he wanted to be like Money Magazine. He wanted to sell all the big people, but he didn't have the numbers or the audit or anything else. And he was in conflict, and he got into terrible cash flow where he couldn't make payroll on time, and he called me. And I got on the phone, and I had him assign to me about $100,000 worth of his ad pages. And I called a bunch of mail order advertisers and said, look, this guy doesn't like mail order advertising, but he owed me money, and he gave me pages instead, and I don't want them, and I'll sell them to you at a discount. And I used that device to get about $60,000 or $70,000 in cash for him instantly to save his face. And I've done that for a lot of people who didn't want their own dire circumstances known by being a buffer and helping transition. I always did it and didn't take a piece. I wanted another soft dollar debt, but you can make a lot of money helping people by saving face. I learned about trading. I traded all sorts of interesting things. Then I traded their list. I traded space. I traded articles for people to reuse. I traded all sorts of joint venture deals with them, and it was just a real flexible environment. And I made about $100,000 in about 3 months just trading assets for them, and they ended up making. I kept them alive. I learned that generating a lot of money doesn't necessarily translate to profit. When all the hoopla dies down, if you don't have a back end, you're really screwed. I learned how really suicidal it is to feed your ego. You will learn in dealing with me that to the extent that my achievements and my posture is useful in negotiating your trust or achieving something that's important, but I'm not egotistical. I don't care if you guys like Mac and Jim Cecil. I really don't. I just want to get the job done. If that's the device, you got to. People that I've learned that I've worked with a lot of people in lots of industries. When a guy gets egotistical and believing his own BS, when a guy starts doing things not for economic reason but for egotistical reason, when a guy knows that an ad could be much more powerful if it was run a certain way, but their image starts getting in the way and they want to run it differently, that's the time to stop working with them because they're on a suicide mission and they're kamikaze entrepreneurs. Comment, Matt? Want to say anything on that?
It's good for God. It's a real important point. I don't know how to say it strongly.
I learned how dangerous overhead can be, how horribly crippling overhead can be, and how it can force you to no longer that you become a slave to your business, and you aren't able to control the business. You got to do all sorts of compromising short-term things just to stay alive, and how much smarter it is to be very low overhead and very pragmatic.
Very variable.
And variable, yeah. Anytime you can be variable in overhead, I prefer that. Even if you pay more on successes, because when you're not doing anything, you got no overhead, and you can sit and take deep breaths and be very strategic. I also learned, because Pat Garrard was and probably still is one of the greatest raconteurs of all time, and he's gotten into a lot of trouble. He ticked off the SEC and the CIA. Remember that? Mm-hmm. That he wrote some promotion about 5 years ago for the Vatia thing, remember?
Yeah.
Where he
Right.
chronicled this great story called the Palladium Grabs. Remember that mailing piece? And he talked about collusion between the CIA and the KGB and everything. And
They tried to assassinate. They shot up my car.
yeah, and it was
That
incredible. And he blatantly lied. And the SEC came down on him and on the guy that wrote it. And it's very interesting. But this guy had the most vivid imagination. And it was really, from a literal standpoint, he said, "I want to tell you a story." And it was a story. But you wanted to believe it was real, and the guy, and people who can chronicle great stories, there's two ways to market: by factual knowledge that you impart, or by telling fascinating stories that seduce people subtly in. Don't you think? And this guy is great at doing that. I don't know if he still writes a lot, does he?
Yeah, for himself. He has royalties coming in from things.
They're really clever. This guy taught me. He was very inspired. It was weird. He started off. His name is Pat Garrard, Garrard. Pat W.H. W.H. is his middle name. I don't know what it stands for. Mm-hmm. But he tells his stories. He and his friend, he's wild. Do you know his background?
No, not entirely.
They were selling smut or something in Canada, and he tells a story about trying to get out of Canada, carrying their whatever they were selling. He was a really bizarre guy, but he's very talented. And then he got into this, and he told when he started Free Enterprise, it was so funny. He had all these orders, but was immobilized, and he couldn't get the magazine started. He had this box full of orders that he never processed, and this box full of bills. And when the box full of bills got higher than the box full of orders, his wife made him start publishing. He'd sort of sit there with all the money in the bank, and it was just weird. I mean, there's a lot of bizarre guys who don't understand the incumbent responsibilities when you start a business, the obligations and first the obligations and the opportunities inherent in fulfilling on your promise.
But that's a terrible story. On one level, you're saying, "Oh, this is a terrible thing to do." On the other hand, that's evidence that people buy your promotion, not your product.
I'm getting to something that will affirm that. It's a scary implication. Just a minute. I'm almost through this. From there, I didn't actually take the job. I worked with him. I don't know. It's a funny story about New York City. Who's from New York City? This guy offered me a job. I helped him as on a contingency basis for a while. He offered me a job back in 1973 or 4 for $75,000 a year, which was a lot of money for me then. I had to work in New York. I flew into New York to see his facilities. My wife and I then went to Greenwich, Connecticut. We were going to get a house. It was the summertime. We got lost coming back, and we ended up in the South Bronx. And it was a sunny day, hot summer, humid. People were sleeping on their balconies. There were tattered buildings that looked like they used to be occupied. It was scared to death. I was lost. I made a policeman escort us back to the highway. When I got back to our hotel, I checked out, went home, left a message on his machine that I didn't want the job and I would never come back to New York again. And I was really screwed because I had quit my other job. he didn't reimburse me for my air travel because he was mad at me. I spent all this money and I had no income, and I didn't like what I was doing before because I found out that postcard mailers didn't convert, and I was in Santa Barbara, which was beautiful, but Santa Barbara is not exactly a fun place to live when you're an employee. It's a great place to live when you're a retired, wealthy scion. It's fabulous, beautiful, glorious, charming, euphoric, serene, tranquil, lush. It's a horrible place when you're not making a lot of money. And I was really screwed. And I sat down, and instead of getting scared, I thought, well, who's his biggest competitor? And it was a company called Entrepreneur Magazine. So I picked up the phone, called Western Union, dictated one of my elaborate mailgrams, told them the whole story. This guy was going to pay me
16 pages, was it 16?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what Chase said, yeah.
Told him the whole story that this guy was going to pay me $75,000, and I could have made him a lot of money, but I got scared in New York, and here I am. I quit my job. I know all about this marketing. I've seen his stuff. He's not exploiting it. I have a problem. He may have a problem. If he does, let's get together. He called me. We got together. He gave me the same $75,000. I moved to Los Angeles. This was a really interesting episode for me. Entrepreneur Magazine started out being a magazine-formatted newsletter sold in an affinity manner as a clique, as a club. You paid $55 a year, and you got membership in the International Entrepreneurs Association. You got I can't remember what they gave you, a plaque and some other hoopla and a membership card. You got one, and you got this report. What he was doing was he was chronicling. He was really ahead of his time. He was chronicling emerging. It's a shame he was here. He was really fascinating.
Yeah, he was good. He was here at the last
He popped
person.
in unexpectedly. The guy
Chase
started Chase
Ravel.
Ravel at the last one, and he was very charming. And he consented to talk for about an hour.
Maybe you can get a tape for them.
Yeah, we might be able to make it.
He was good. It was very
But
good.
what we did, he was doing every issue of this newsletter, which was magazine formatted. He would chronicle one or two emerging small businesses, generic, that were opportunities. And he'd tell you really a lot about it for a layperson. If it was a franchise one, he'd tell you who the good franchisers were. If you didn't want a franchise, how to do it yourself. He'd give you tricks and techniques for saving money and organizing it and buying equipment and promoting. But when he was done with it, he didn't do anything else. He'd just do another one. And he was very, very marginal as far as profitable. We got the great idea, why not take those articles that are about 10 or 12 pages, why not meld to those 20 or 30 pages worth of boilerplate material information anybody needs to know about any kind of business they'd start, how to secure an attorney, how to get permits, how to find a good advertising agency, et cetera, et cetera. And let's call them startup manuals and sell them to the outside market. We sold 400,000 startup manuals within 18 months at $39 or $45 a piece, and that dwarfed the other business. I learned so many things with Entrepreneur Magazine. It was incredible. I learned how to build a multi-pylon business. So many people have all their, remember I told you a lot of littles instead of a little lots? So many people have their whole success predicated on one very flimsy bamboo shoot that they built their whole edifice on. I learned and I built these very broad-based pylons. For example, we had catalogs that we mailed all over the place selling all our startup manuals. We had promotions we did concurrently selling membership in the association. We had ads we ran in magazines offering the catalog if you'd send just your name. We had other ads. We'd run another ad at magazines saying free information, or excuse me, saying the world's most expensive magazine for only half price, and they would send us $3. We had telemarketing going on. We had all sorts of things going concurrently, and the cumulative effect was incredible. I learned how to redeploy assets like you can't believe. I learned how to take articles and turn them into products. I learned how to, when you got lots of reports, to amalgamate them. We had something called the Entrepreneurs Institute, and we had collections of the 20 best food-related businesses, low-investment businesses, service businesses, automotive businesses, technical businesses, intellectual businesses, and we'd sell all these recycled stuff for a couple $100. And ask Bob Morrison, he does that now today with his amalgamating them. We put on seminars. And we did seminars differently. Our seminars, you pay $10 at the gate, and then you pick and choose the individual workshops you wanted to attend and pay $35 a piece. I got them to record them and transcribe them, and I melded those together with other groups and other products that we would sell. And we sold them in all sorts of different formats and recycled them and redeployed them. I did barter like you can't believe. I traded for advertising. We had seminars. I traded space that cost us nothing for books that we'd sell in the magazine. I would sell all sorts of things and trade for lists, for reusing articles as bonuses. We get advertising in other magazines and mailing lists. and joint ventures with people. It was incredible. I learned how to do some really inventive negotiation, and how just because somebody had never done anything didn't mean it couldn't be done if you could present it compellingly and clearly and powerfully and seductively. I learned the incredible basis of back end. When you get a subscriber, they're so hot for so much information. There's a window of opportunity in business op that's about 6 or 8 months. For 6 or 8 months, people are something happened in their life. Either their wife's ragging on them because they can't afford a new car, or their lifestyle, or traveling, or somebody down the street's doing better, or a friend or relative, or they were passed up for a raise, or they feel unfulfilled, or whatever. Not dissimilar to you, but this is the general business op. It's a much more inactive field. And these people, for about 6 or 8 months, they're going to do it. And they'll buy everything. I mean, they'll buy tons. Those of you who have pursued business op, you know what I'm talking about. You buy everything exploring this thing, and then something happens. You either get a new job and you're satisfied, or you get a raise, or you decide, what? I got to work? What? I got to mortgage my house? What? I don't draw cash from it for 6 months? And you go back, but so you got to hit while you got to literally proverbially strike while the iron is hot and and exploit the opportunities right there. I learned then about marginal net worth theory. We engaged Dan Rosenthal. It was incredible. He didn't teach me copywriting, but he introduced me to Claude Hopkins. And what I learned from Claude Hopkins, I didn't know how to write copy then. Before that, I was a hyperbolic person like 90% of the other people. But I learned you didn't have to be a great copywriter if you could just incorporate the right components. I learned that a great concept will transcend great copy, but great copy won't transcend a bad concept. Does that make sense to you?
You did again?
If you got a great concept, I mean, and I should use it somewhere in this Joe Carbo book. It's like that letter about his
Oh yeah,
his
the
car.
illiterate, the catalog.
Yeah, somebody find me. Want to send any of the staff people? Mike, have somebody find me that letter in the Find Me of the Joe Carbo book. There's a letter that he writes about trying to sell a car, and we'll read it to you later. But a great concept. Oh yeah, it's great.
Do you have the Alexander Cohen letter?
Which one is it? Oh, did I send it to you? No, it's a great letter.
Do
Didn't
you
you
have it? I haven't.
No, you got it here?
No, I got it.
That's a great letter. Didn't you think?
You don't have a copy of that?
Somewhere, but you know me. I don't save all these things. That's a great letter.
I should have brought it. Maybe I can get somebody in my office to fax it.
That would be good. That would be really good.
Because that's a great letter.
Did you make that same comment about a headline as you did about copy?
What's that?
That a good concept will transcend a headline?
No, a great headline will get a lot more people to read it. But if it's a bad proposition, they won't respond to it.
Yeah.
Hold on.
If you bury your concept entirely, nobody will ever know.
I'll try to read this, and then maybe we'll break in a minute. Okay, this is a. It only takes a few pages here, doesn't it? You guys have it. Well, I won't go through the whole thing. It's basically he's telling you how to write an ad in one word. Don't. Most people try to write ads, immediately adopt a tilted style, or try to terribly clever, or use words that they and the rest of us have to look up in the dictionary. The result is a special language and form that I call advertising-ese. There's only one problem with it. It doesn't communicate. It's not personal. It's all skin and no flesh, and certainly no guts. When you've found something you want to sell, here's all you have to do to create a successful ad, and I promise that it'll work. First, think of all the things your product will do for people. Then pick out the one most important specific thing it will do. Not just makes long life a reality, but guaranteed to make you live to 100. Not just you can be important, but how to get a promotion and raise in 5 minutes. Not just you can be beautiful, but 7 ways you can make him ask for a date. Not just it's easy to make money, but, will you forgive me, the lazy man's way to riches. Every one of those headlines appeals to one or more of the 4 R's. Remember, reincarnation, immortality, recognition, romance, reward, and the strength, the drama. You guys get a copy of this, by the way, in the material we're going to give you. Will determine how successful you will be in getting the attention of your reader, listener, or viewer. There's no mystery to it, although a lot of ad agency copy chiefs who are pulling down $50,000 a year, this was written in 70, would like you to think so. I'm showing how they do it step by step, and you can do it too. So let's continue. Think about what you'd like the product to offer you, what problem you'd like it to solve. You're really not that much different from anyone else. Write down all the ideas that come to you, even if they seem silly or wild. Don't try to judge them, not yet. Just write them down. Keep a pad and a pencil in your pocket or within easy reach. If you don't capture your inspiration and make it a prisoner, it'll escape and be lost forever. Isn't that interesting? All of my best ideas were generated when I was driving my car, or riding my bike, or reading a book, just falling asleep, or just waking up. So many people try so hard to get so much done too fast, don't you think? They don't let the gestational ability of the mind and the subconscious really permeate and percolate and gestate for you. Do you notice what each of these activities had in common? Nothing. That's right. I was doing absolutely nothing about solving my problem, how to sell a particular product. And then the right idea suddenly popped up. Not out of nowhere, out of my subconscious mind. What had I done to feed the subconscious mind the information it needed so it could spit out the answer? I'd simply thought about the product. Not so much what it is, but what it does. My wife bought a vacuum cleaner and hired a housekeeper. But what she really wanted was an easy way to clean the house. Do you see the difference? People buy things or hire people, but they really are after is a result. That's a very powerful subject. Think about what I just said. In selling,
Yes, right.
what they are after is a result. This guy was so bright.
So clear. His writing style is fabulous. It's so clear, so down to earth.
If she could press a button and through some miracle of electronics or ultrasonic sound waves, the house would be cleaned spotlessly and the cost was within reason, she'd junk the vacuum cleaner and fire the housekeeper. At least when I asked her, she said she would. So think about that product. Think about what the product will do, better or cheaper or faster than anything else you know about. Think about all the reasons why you would buy it. Think about all the reasons why you wouldn't buy it. How many of those objections can you overcome? Write it all down. Read magazines and newspapers. Notice how articles about the problem leap right off the page and hit you in the eye. It's true. It's really a smart man. If you must, talk about the product with people who are enthusiastic as you are. But even if you try to avoid the wet blankets, there's a danger. You might literally talk it out and release the energy you've been building up. Because that's exactly what you've been doing, fueling the subconscious, warming it up so it can produce the spark you're looking for. When you feel you're saturated with facts and insight, when you've racked your brain, simply forget about the problem. The next step is to do nothing. Go on with other things that make up your life. What could be easier? But at that point, the problem is as good as solved. In an hour or a day or a week, you'll get the idea. The one perfect way to express exactly what your product will do. It'll come when you're not thinking about it at all. Write it down, keep writing. Because the headline or the attention-getting idea is just the valve. It's been blown off by the pressure of the whole idea that's boiling underneath. It'll all come out now. Just keep writing. Keep writing till you run out of steam. Chances are that you won't until you're finished. Isn't that true, too? It's wild. But if you do, don't worry about it. Forget it again. When it's ready, the subconscious will let you know, and it's raring to go back to work. What about all those notes you made? Don't look at them or think about them until you're finished. That's because you want to give your subconscious mind a chance to edit them, to polish up the good ones, combine some to produce new ideas, discard the ones that are unworkable or simply don't fit in your new concept. After you're through writing, look at your notes. There might be a phrase or two that you'll want to include, but it's not likely. That's true, you know that?
Sure.
You'll be amazed at how your subconscious has sorted out your input, keeping the good stuff and rejecting the junk. At this point, put what you've written away for a couple of days before you look at it again. Make minor corrections. Read it aloud and listen to whether it sounds like you talking. That's important. It should use the same words you'd ordinarily use in talking to another human being. If you've included something terribly clever or coined a great little slogan, kill it, or it will kill you. As soon as people become aware of your style, you've lost them. They may be entertained, they may be amused, but they won't buy. The next step is the hardest. Have other people read what you have written, but you're not listening to their opinion. Not till you've had a lot more experience and know which opinions to accept and which to reject, and that takes years. At this point, the only thing you want to know is whether your ad is clear. Repeat that. All you want to know is whether the ad is clear. Not whether they like it or dislike it, only whether they understand it. If they don't know what you mean, clarify it. If they have to reread a phrase before they understand it, parentheses, watch their eye movements, change it. But don't change your approach or change a single word because they suggest one that's more refined or sounds better. After reading your ad, if they know what your product will do for them, what its advantages and disadvantages are, if they know how much it costs and where to buy it, that's all that's necessary. Why do you tell them about the disadvantages, the small weak points? So they'll believe you. And if you've been completely honest, they'll have to believe you because it's the truth. The truth told as attractively as possible, perhaps, but still the truth. You think it's hard to write a good ad? Let me show you how easy it is. Incent. Dear Betty, I love you very much. That's his wife. I want to take care of you and our kids for the rest of our lives. There'll be good times and bad, but I'll try to do my best with what I've got.